Welcome to my presentation on the mineral magnesium. Magnesium is a element which typically appears as the ion Mg2+. It was discovered a long time ago in Magnesia, Greece. It is not magnetic despite the name. However, magnetite, which was discovered in the same place, is magnetic. So I've always wondered, that is magnesium magnetic? No, despite the name, it is not. So, here's a little fun story. Epsom, England, in 1618, as the story goes. I couldn't tell if this was a true story, but there's a farmer by the name of Henry Wicker. His cattle wouldn't drink from a particular water source, but he noticed that the water source was particularly good for healing cuts and scratches and that type of thing. At the time, nobody really understood what was going on, but eventually we came to recognize that as magnesium sulfate, or Epsom salt, which is why it's called Epsom salt, because those originates from Epsom, England. So, fun story about magnesium. So why is it essential? A quotation from the course textbook says that it's essential to bone formation, aids in enzyme function, and aids nerve and heart function. Okay, that doesn't sound like too much. Actually, I'll skip ahead. So when I first saw all of these functions and all of the problems that it can cause by having a deficiency, I was really surprised. I wasn't sure how that was possible. But going back to this slide, if you know a little bit about Anat and Phys, a sodium-potassium pump, which I will explain a little bit more about later, is very foundational. It's involved in pretty much every cell in the body. Very, very important. And another very important thing about magnesium is ATP, which is the body's energy source, is not biologically active without magnesium, meaning that when people say, ATP, they're typically talking about ATP, which is bonded to magnesium. Otherwise, the body can't really use it. So a few reasons why it's very, very important to the body. This is paraphrasing the textbook. It's just involved in everything: metabolism, muscle contraction, protein synthesis, bones, nerves, any kind of muscle, blood sugar. So just all these different things, and yeah, I'll kind of explain more on why it's such a fundamental thing later on. But first, so to kind of understand where to get magnesium from, everybody knows that we need oxygen, and that the hemoglobin is important to transporting that, and iron is important for hemoglobin. Well, the same thing is true of plants. The chlorophyll is what I don't know how it works exactly, but chlorophyll is necessary for oxygen use by plants, and magnesium is essential to chlorophyll, just like iron is essential to hemoglobin. So, plant sources are the best way to obtain magnesium. The textbook and other sources said things like green vegetables, nuts, legumes, halibut, chocolate, trail mix, bran cereal. I guess halibut really isn't a plant source, but it was one of the ones listed in the textbook. This is a cool picture that I found. I really thought it was interesting. So this is, on the left here, you see the GI tract, probably the small intestine, and on the right side you see the blood. When I was reading, most magnesium is absorbed in the distal end of the small intestine, which would mean the end that is attached to, that is closest to the large intestine. And it's showing a few different ways that it can get from the GI tract to the blood. The pink and orange. So this ginormous square here is a cell membrane, and the pink and orange are proteins within that which allow the green dot magnesium to pass through. The yellow circles above are the same type of thing but outside the cell. It's been a long time since I've taken an Nat and Phys, so I'm trying to remember what's going on here. But this is just kind of a cool graphic showing exactly how magnesium is absorbed into the blood or into cells. So what does deficiency look like? Calcium and vitamin D levels are typically impacted by magnesium deficiency, and I believe, according to the textbook and some other sources I found, most people do not get enough magnesium. Most people do not get enough magnesium, and a lot of that is because our foods are so processed. And some of the symptoms are muscle cramps, twitches, mental disorders, osteoporosis, fatigue, muscle weakness, high blood pressure, asthma, irregular heart. So, I mean, that's just a very broad set of symptoms, but with what I was kind of talking about before, how the sodium potassium pump is, a part of every cell in the body and is so fundamental to the body working, and ATP requires magnesium. Just those two facts mean that virtually every cell in the body is heavily dependent on magnesium. It's, as a side note, it's one of the most common minerals in the body. Like versus other minerals, I think there's only one more that is in higher amount. So, yeah, lots of problems that can result from it. Toxicity is extremely rare. In healthy people, the kidneys do a very good job at removing it. But some of the things that can result are diarrhea, weakness, nausea, slowed breathing, malaise, which is just not feeling well, coma, and death. Diarrhea is usually from taking too much via supplements and pills. Um, Older people are at greater risk for magnesium toxicity just because their kidneys may not be doing as good a job. So wrapping up, I'll just kind of explain this sodium-potassium pump. So this is this big circle here is a cell membrane. The inside and outside of a cell is kind of what that is showing. And a sodium-potassium pump is basically the mechanism whereby sodium and potassium move inside and outside the cell. ATP is required. The pump, or it's an enzyme, or no, it's not an enzyme, it's a protein, is the mechanism whereby these cross into and out of the cell membrane. Why would you want that? So something very important for things to move inside and outside of the membrane is the maintenance of what's called the electrical gradient, which basically means that sometimes in order for something to move inside and outside of the cell, in fact, a lot of times, you need a greater positive charge inside the cell than outside, a difference, because that kind of induces an attraction, like opposites attract. So if the inside of the cell is more negative, then it will attract certain things will be I forget all the things that it does, but yeah, look it up, electrical gradient of cell membrane. Do a Google search for that, and that'll teach you a lot of what's going on there. But this is the sodium-potassium protein pump, and virtually every cell contains thousands and thousands of those, and they really cannot function without them. And because magnesium is required for ATP, which is required for this pump to work, magnesium is important for literally every cell in the body. So when you're deficient, everything suffers, which, going back a few slides to muscle cramps, twitches, mental disorders, osteoporosis, fatigue, muscle weakness, high blood pressure, asthma, irregular heartbeat. I mean, that's a lot of stuff. It's a very broad set of symptoms, but it kind of makes sense when you realize that it impairs this mechanism, which is so fundamental to every process in the body. Yeah, virtually every cell in the body, kind of what I was saying before. So wrapping up, therefore what? Eat your veggies. Frozen vegetables are the optimal way to ensure adequate magnesium intake and absorption. They are cheap, but quality. They are fast and easy to prepare. Magnesium supplements help, but only so much. They don't really, in everything I read, it kind of suggested that you needed the supplements didn't really fully replace food. You need magnesium in your food. Fresh vegetables aren't always fresh. They don't contain as much nutrients as frozen vegetables sometimes. And that's something that, I don't know, I remember learning in Nutrition 150. So here's kind of the conclusion. I just want to read something I found. With the omnipresence of processed foods, boiling, and consumption of demineralized soft water, most industrialized countries are deprived of their natural magnesium supply. So that kind of gives you an insight into why so many people are deficient just because of processed foods. that is all I have, and I think I'm just under 15, so thank you very much.